Oh no!
And so we have to pause the recording.
Okay. Depending on where you're from, and in spite of many comments to the difference, I see Sam still hasn't started drinking whiskey yet, so you must actually
not
be
yet.
in this.
No, it's not yet lunchtime here, so
there are situations that require that you're not overly honest, and whiskey doesn't help with that. So probably.
Correct.
Well, still, I appreciate you asking me on today. One of the things and the thing I wanted to talk about is something that's pretty cool to me, is the ability to fully integrate an Ekahau project file, which in my vernacular, in the Cisco vernacular, represents my intent for my RF network, to integrate that into Cisco's DNA Center in an automated fashion, meaning I don't actually have to import all of that. Why Ekahau? Well, you guys are all here on this broadcast, so you're pretty aware of Ekahau's prowess and their importance to the market and the tools that they provide, but we love it. Ekahau Pro has continued to grow and meets every need that I have from an RF planning standpoint today. The Sidekick is amazingly accurate and gives me the ability to cover and advance my scale on assaulting different projects. Survey for iPhone and iPad, increasing the ease and the accuracy. Ekahau Capture, easy to use capture, packet capture. And then the cloud. The cloud is everything. So it makes sense to us to take a look at futures and be able to do a lot more of this in real time and automate it. And that certainly fits in with where we'd expect Cisco's DNA Center to fit. Cisco keeps our product updated within Ekahau. Ekahau keeps coming up with great new solutions. For instance, the tri-radio, that was a nice challenge. But all of our antenna models, as we release them, are in there, so you should be able to do a design solution with any Cisco product at this point in time, and that again makes it invaluable. We do validate coverage. We use Ekahau in our labs. We use the Sidekick because of its accuracy. One of the things that we regularly do is when we get a new AP and we get new antenna structures, and we're going to 8x8 now, which is definitely different than 4x4. We want to see it plugged into the same spot in the lab as another AP and give us relatively the same coverage at the same power levels, because that's something that we design closely for. So every time we do this out in Richfield in the competitive lab, they're hanging APs and walking an Ekahau pattern. So we get to compare that back against the model data and validate that things are working right. So why an Ekahau project file? Well, the intent for my network has already been expressed over sometimes many months of designing, tweaking, putting antenna angles in. I think if you keep it less complicated, it's better. But I can put in all my attenuations, and this has always been something that Cisco supported. I could import an Ekahau project file into Prime. I had to do it via hitting the button on Ekahau to export to a Prime archive file, and then I could import that archive file back into Prime. And in its latest version, I can pull the obstacles, meaning the walls and those attenuation values in, which is really useful because, well, we don't make AP planning software. We have some planning ability built into our tools, but I think we still have, 7 different attenuation types, Sam? You're probably more familiar than I. It wasn't overly useful to me.
Yeah.
To a novice, probably okay. I look at it and I'm like, that's cute. So, being able to pull that data in was important, right? To pull in the AP model, the antenna type, angles, orientation. That can represent a lot of effort on a user's part if you're doing that individually, interface by interface. And in fact, we see it all the time in customer environments. It tends to, you get a map and you don't even see any walls represented on it because nobody spent the time, or they did spend the time once and then they changed the map and had to go back. So you can spend a lot of time in that. If you've already spent that time, why would I make you do that twice in a different interface? And that was the question. I went back to developers in DNA spaces or DNA center architects, and we ask that if we've already got an intent that's expressed, what can we do to not type that twice? Because we all know when you do that, you're probably going to introduce some errors. I've seen situations where we had to populate a prime with 1,000 APs for Cisco Live, say in 4 days, and you take 3 really good guys and put them on that task all day long, and you've still got errors that never get fixed before you unplug everything and go home. So it can be a lot of work. But onboarding into DNA Center is easier now and is going to get easier. So in the first release, and some of you, if you were out at our SEVT, saw this, but in the first release, this is actually pretty straightforward. You have to code the file correctly, meaning we need to tell DNA Center automation things that it understands. And the number one thing for DNA Center automation is its hierarchy. So we can have a global, and underneath of that, an area. You can even have sub areas, but that takes away from what we're talking about here. Within an area, I can have one or many buildings. And then I have floors within a building. So it's fairly straightforward. I've got global, area, building, and floors, which is all represented within an Ekahau project file today. The recommendation would be one building per file. And the other thing that I will caution you on, this is listed in the caveats, is this is a project file, not a survey file today. The other thing is it is greenfield only, meaning once I go ahead and read that in, if I've got a 4-floor building and I only want to put 1 floor into it, that building is going to be a 1-floor building when I'm done doing the import. So it's intended today to grab the data and rewrite whatever is in there. So if I take the project file and I initiate an upload, if I've taken the time to go back in my project file and actually put in real AP names, and those APs are discovered within DNAC and in their inventory, then I will match those APs to the project file APs, and with the click of a button, I will actually take those APs, put them on a map in the right coordinates, and that will become an active managed element that's assigned to a map. So the APs would remain unclaimed. For instance, I'm doing an installation and I'm plugging my APs in, I've got my controller up. I've discovered that all by DNAC, and now I want to configure this. I would at that point import my project file with all of the right AP names, and then I'm going to go match on those AP names. So from a DNA Center standpoint, I'm going to run through this real quickly, just kind of showing the document here, and then we're going to go ahead and do a demo and we'll take questions. From a DNA standpoint, in this release, your minimum file level needs to be a 10.0.2 project file, and then DNA Center needs to be 1.3.1 or 1.3.0 or better. So I would select design. And then within design, and this slide's actually wrong, isn't it amazing what you catch when you're actually presenting? I should do that at the area level. So I've got a global, and then I've got an area S and a building 1 in the slide, but I've got an import Ekahau project icon within that, and that's where I'm going to start from. That's going to open up a screen that I can go ahead and select the file. Once I've selected the file and selected next, it's going to read that file in and give me a preview. At this point in time, I haven't changed anything within DNAC. So it's going to give me a preview of what's in that file. And in this particular file, there's a single building. It's got 3 floors, and it's got 12 planned access points across those 3 floors. So if that matches, and it actually does tell me if I've got errors, will give me a readout of those areas. And you can expand upon that in the bottom. If I was to click on the area that's total buildings, it would break that out, what's listed across the top. But I've got a good import source. Once I select to go ahead and proceed, there's 2 conditions I'll find APs in, right? So I will immediately go to pulling the map, all of the obstacles, all of the AP positions. If I make a match on an AP name, and well, I'll get into that in a second. If I make a match on an AP name that's active in the system or has been discovered by DNA Center, it'll go ahead and assign that AP, assuming it is an unclaimed AP, assign it to this map as you pull it in. Any APs that we can't match on will get a little P icon on them. And that little, this actually will become an active AP, and you can actually see the influence of the obstacles on that because it's bending around walls. So this is a completed map. APs that don't match are going to get a P. That's called a planned AP, and there's a workflow behind that to actually go and find the right AP. The other reasons that an AP will become planned is if, for instance, I match good on the name, but I've got the wrong type of AP. So there's a discrepancy within the system. In order to go back and reassign this at any point, let's say there's two conditions here. I've got the wrong information, or I just don't have it on the system yet. I can go back at a later point, and there's a workflow associated with that. I can select that planned AP, and then I can open the assign panel. And within the assign panel, there's a couple of ways that I'm going to look at it. The most common error is I fat-fingered something on the AP names. You guys all know some people have some really, really complicated AP names, which just doesn't lend to speed or accuracy, and I might get a 0 instead of an O, or any number of translation errors. The first way we're going to look for these is matching by name. So if I've got a partial match on a name, it's going to build a list of those and stack rank them on the best match. I can also go back and match by type. For instance, if the name doesn't match at all, it's going to list all the APs that match my type. And then lastly, I've got all APs that I can go take a look through and manually make a connection between my planned AP and my active AP. Provided, and that's only going to list APs that are discovered on the system. So all of that functionality is there. We'll go to that in a second. I'm going to go ahead and demo this. Any questions so far? And I'm not watching the question panel. Just let me know if it's...
The questions are pretty good right now, Jim. I think that we went on so fast, and it was great. I think we kind of forgot to do a little quick introduction who was on the line today, but we do want to acknowledge a couple of folks here. We've got of course yours, Jim Florwick, who's joining us as from Cisco. He's the senior TME, and we also have Salmon Clements, who's also our enterprise director from Presidio, and he's also kind of a pro user at the wireless and the DNA space as well. And we've also got Mikko, who's coming in from Helsinki today, and he's actually on our product management team. And of course, Abhishek, who's my counterpart in Reston, Virginia. He's manning the Q&A. And yours truly, Stuart. So yeah, welcome everyone to the webinar. We'll just add that in there quickly, but without further ado, Jim, I mean, a lot of us, I think there's many on the chat and on the Q&A that are really looking forward to seeing how this actually import works, and how this how this can actually definitely bring some efficiency to the process here. So.
Okay, well, I'd ask everybody to keep in mind that this is the first release. Here's the hierarchy that I was talking about. When you first log into to a DNA Center, you're going to get come into your main screen, which gives you the health and the vitalness of your entire domain. To import or to go add a site, you're going to select design. There's a couple of ways to get to this, and that's one of the things that I actually do like. Right now in the first release, in order to import, and believe me, we've gotten a lot of feedback on this. It was very helpful with development. One of the things that is required when I create a building is that I have a geotag on it. I've got to have a lat and longitude and an address to convert so that I can place that accurately on a map. And that is something that we, did not have the workflow for. So the building and the floors, you're going to go ahead and create those first within DNAC. But you don't have to put an image in it. You don't have to put a scale on it. You don't have to do any of this. You actually just have to go in and create a floor. And you've been playing with this a bit, haven't you, Stu?
Absolutely, yeah. And
yeah, so right here you put the name that matches in your file. And I'm sorry, Stu, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Okay. All right, so I do select the area, right? Because I'm going to implement a building. I want to actually be at the right area. So I'm going to import an Ekahau Project file. I'm going to select that file. I can either drop it. I've got a couple of files in here, and these are not overly complex files. I'm going to save that. That's going to upload it, and then it's going to give me my readout. Right now it says that I'm looking at an import preview. I've got one building, 3 floors in one area, and I've got 7 APs that I'm looking to match. So that gives me the readout of it there. If I had any errors right here, it would actually list those errors out for me. I can look at warnings, and there's a number of reasons you get warnings. Not to belabor the point, I am going to reduce that panel so I can see my button.
And it's very important to hit the next button.
It really is. It will,
because it says,
yeah.
That's right. It says, yo, it's successfully completed, but make sure you hit the next button. And then it continues on. I had that. I'm like, hey, why isn't that working? Yeah.
Like a double commit. So now that I've completed the process, I get a complete readout of this, right? So I've got the total number of floors, planned access points that were implemented. I only matched on one access point. So I've got a plan, pod 1, pod 2, and I can go back immediately and take a look at the hierarchy on this. So if I go into building pod 1, and this all came from our SEVT, Pang Zhu, who some of you know, was very kind to lend me his demo server. On the map that I just imported, I had one AP get matched, and then I've got 3 additional APs that did not match. Now, in this environment, or on this cluster, I think I have exactly 1 AP, so that's not very exciting. But if I wanted to go back and assign that, I would launch that workflow from here. So I've got a very good representation of what still needs work. And I did import all of the images. Really important to point out, if I go in to edit this, the values for some of my obstacles, for instance, all of my obstacles, all of my walls are there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
if I click on that, it tells me what the attenuation value was. That's not just a static value.
And that's really important. That's importing from the project file. So all that work that that you did within Ekahau and the planning is actually taken into account into DNA. So that's actually really useful, because then now we don't have to go and do double the work, right? We're now just taking that whole project file and putting it in there with all of the obstacles and the attenuation values.
Correct. So that started out blank, populated everything, and actually you can see that we also track things like coverage areas, location regions, rails, markers. So there's a lot more that we can extract. Those of you that are familiar with the product know that I can put a lot more in here than just a bunch of APs. So that's where we're at today. I hope everybody, finds that somewhat useful. Still, I'm going to go back over to the presentation, and we can kind of start talking through questions.
I think there was, I think we had a missed one there. Or was it? I think, was it when we're doing our import, Jim, that we don't have to necessarily worry about if we already have APs in there. It's the naming, right? We can start out the naming if we want to match up to make it easier, but it's not necessarily, necessary.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's not 100% necessary. If you want to automatically match on the right AP, then you can actually pre-populate it with the names, right? And that's just an edit, you know, within the project file. But if that data is there, we'll actually do a search and just drive that AP as active, right? So, I mean, it's a real big time saver if you happen to know where you're applying the APs. In a greenfield situation, you're going to give all the APs names anyway, right?
Correct, yeah.
So putting that into the project file makes it really nice and easy. You certainly can go discover the APs or manually match them up. Just keep in mind, you know, when you do that, you'll be able to type in a portion of the AP name, and if it's on the system. But you could be wading through quite a few APs, particularly if you've got dots all over that global screen I showed you at the beginning. So a couple of things to be aware of. Right now, the import is greenfield only, right? Brownfield is definitely coming. Ekahau Pro version 10.0.2 minimum is the required for support. Cisco DNA Center 1.3.0 minimum required. And on the way to preparing this right after the 10.1 release, we caught a last minute bug in that we have a max version number is what it turned out to be, Stu. That's permitted. So if you went to do a 10.1 file, a little bit embarrassing, it claimed that file was an invalid file format, which is a shame because we actually reviewed that schema when it changed back in September, I think it was, or was it August timeframe?
Yeah,
so,
we had change yet.
Yeah, current patch level for DNA Center is at 1.3.4 right now. 1.3.5 will be out there real soon. Mm-hmm. And the developer who was responsible for bringing us these wonderful things and many, many more thoughts has promised me that it will be making that patch release.
Right. Yeah. And so, so I guess the long and short of it, folks, is that don't we any of your project files that you were working on from 10.02 to 10.04, for those that haven't upgraded to 10.1 yet, if you're using those older project files, they work just fine. It's with DNA 1.3.5. We, like I said, Jim said, is that we needed to change a couple of the schema things, and so because we've added a few extra smarts, and we are working closely with Cisco on this one, so we can actually get some of the new feature sets that we got in 10.1 to get it into 1.3.5, and and as like Jim says, we're still working on some additional things in the background that to kind of enhance that process, right, as we get into the after greenfield deployments and into the brownfield. So it's definitely today, and at 1.3.5 is coming shortly, as far as I'm aware. But I know that the patches, I know that we've got it. The developers have it working in 1.3.5. So and that should be released soon. Actually, we don't know when 1.3.5 is coming, do we? Or
yeah, it's real soon.
Yeah, it's real soon.
How's that for a commitment? I learned that from a product manager.
Yes, real soon. Yeah, I think it's coming sooner than we think. Yeah,
it is. It'll be in the next.
We can't.
Release.
Yeah, we can't tell you. Yeah, we can't tell you when, what day, but it is coming very shortly. So,
yeah. I already have a patch I haven't implemented this morning to go ahead and validate it, but it was a real simple fix.
Yes. Yeah.
And not something we're liable to repeat. So were there any good questions that we maybe want to take live here?
Do we have a limitation of the ESX file size that we are importing into DNA? I would say not that we are aware of
no.
at this time. No. Because I think traditionally, even in DNA, we were doing large project file. Even we're doing large images anyways. So.
Yeah, that's an important fact, though, because I can tell you personally from laying out convention centers and things like that, floors or a building, the concept of a floor or a building sometimes takes on for me anyway, different areas within the same building, right? Getting down to a detailed level map, for instance, a convention center could be 1,800, meters in length, 1.8 kilometers or so. In length, that's really tough to get any detail out of a map if you create that as one whole map. So typically I'll break that down as halls, which would then be a building versus a floor within that building, right? So keeping in mind how the hierarchy lays out or how you're going to look at that in a management scenario. But again, that's like a corner case to think about. Just keep in mind the hierarchy and how you're laying that project file out before you really get invested in it.
Hey Tim, is there a limitation on the floor plan itself? So what the size of the floor plan is, or what the format is?
I'm not aware of a limitation within DNA Center presently. There were limitations in some of the versions of Prime as far as the density of the image and the size of the floor plan and the number of APs even that you could apply to a floor plan were limited. And a lot of those, like I said, those are corner cases. Typically, you know, Miko, we get involved in some stuff that kind of the normal Wi-Fi implementation doesn't get near, like whole cities and things.
So just
Jim,
to
there seems to be
answer
a lot of questions, yeah, about what's coming next as far as day 2 support or feeding live data back into DNA Center without giving into NDA type of topics. Can you give any feedback on where you hope this goes in the long run?
I can share my vision. I really can't talk about roadmap items that are being implemented or in the works. What I can say, Sam, as a preface to that is we're having some really good conversations with Ekahau engineers, and they're talking with our engineers. It certainly makes sense to me with configurable areas and different SLAs that there is a ton of information contained in that file that I could actually just automate actions within DNA Center. And I will also say that there's a considerable number of resources looking at just use cases that do just that. So we were actually talking this morning internally about some new features coming up around AP refreshes or being able to manage, re-implementing certain sites or upgrading. So there's a lot of good circular talks going on right now between Ekahau and Cisco about what this might do. Some of it's been waiting on the cloud, which is fully realized now in the Ekahau world, and then cloud connectors with Cisco DNA C. I think you'll see some push on that here over the next year. So I think this is just going to get better, Sam.
Wouldn't it be great if I could survey something on my iPad and push it up to the cloud and mash a button and have it automatically show up in DNA Center?
That would be really cool, but I really, I couldn't comment on something just like that, Sam.
I'm sure.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. What if, and let me paint another scenario for you. Let me just ask another what if, since we're out here on pretend land. What if I got an insight from my DNA Center that suggested I had some RF issues, and I could push a button and I could dispatch that to my partner in the format of an ESX file that they could then take out, prove out, and re-implement that and push it back up to the cloud.
That bidirectional communication between DNA Center and Ekahau enabled by the cloud. Doesn't that sound like
but we're way out on a ledge here now, Sam. I mean, that's a really good piece of fiction at the moment. But, the mind can drift and see all kinds of directions this could go in.
Absolutely. And I think that to the folks out there, I think there was just some versioning numbers that were that we wanted just to clarify. And with 10.1 going forward, it is DNA Center 1.3.1.5 is what the version is. I think just to clarify that number, I think
I'm gonna put that slide back up there.
Yeah, I think it's 1.3.1.5. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think because there's, I think that's how the actual DNA Center versioning is, I believe. If anyone else can keep me honest.
3.1.5?
I think it's 3.1.5, is it not? I think it's
major release is the
1.3.
second number, and then the patch or patch release is the third number, is my understanding. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, it might be.
There's a whole stream of
1.5.
numbers if you look at it on your DNA Center too.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
All right,
most people,
yeah,
most people are on 1.3.1.3 and .4. So, but for sure, yeah, we know that the .5 will have a lot of the extra schema changes ready for us. But the intention of the webinar was today is just to kind of show what we are doing and how it is working, and that we can do the importation of the project files to at least enhance the workflow. Right? There's a few questions out there that are asking about that workflow, right? Is understanding is, yes, I would plan my APs in Ekahau, and then I would import that plan into DNA, and then the AP placement would then be, pushed out there. And of course, if the AP name matches, then you're good to go, right? And then that way makes it easier as long as it matches up with what you have in your DNA. But that was one of the questions on there, and that is definitely the workflow that you want to go after. But there are some questions that we're talking about AP on a stick, and I think that maybe have been answered earlier. But definitely, those are the type of what would you say, Jim and Sam? I think that's more of the kind of the post-analysis survey of what where APs are, just to kind of rearrange them.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting use case, because I know multiple partners. Sam would be the first one to vocalize that. Most of his designs end up being AP on a stick. So his project file before implementation is an AP on a stick file. So that's something that's being looked at by development. Technically, we don't think there's a difference between the two, but that's a goal, to be able to implement an AP on a stick. And also it's a goal to be able to consume that data, because there's a lot of data that's valuable in there. So finding consumers of that data, those are questions we're going to answer moving forward within DNAC. But I can envision that data going back into assurance data and being added or amalgamated with sensor data. So there's a lot of exciting possibilities here. Today, it is strictly a project file, so a predictive project file.
Okay.
It's a short subject, Stuart, because it's a quick import.
It's actually, it is, isn't it? Yes, it is very quick import, right? Yeah. Someone was asking, for the attenuation values and whatnot of elevator shafts, and how is this displayed in DNA Center C after import. And I think actually, Jim, you did show that at the during the demo.
I did. I can go back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or is it recommended to use only walls? No, you can use anything you want in there, and it should appear. And we are working on additional things to kind of help that out, right? So as we get more complex with our obstacles, right? So we're going to be adding a little bit more to that. But right now, anything that you put in there with those obstacles, we're going to be able to see. Yeah.
It maps as a custom. If you take a look at what DNAC offers, you've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 individual choices, and those are preset. The safety valve for that has always been a custom. Again, DNA Center's job is to be automation, monitoring, and intelligence for the network, doing some reasoning. So it's not a rich environment. It gets most users through it, but the fact that we can take this data, and this was really targeted towards folks that are doing a higher level implementation, right? Mm-hmm. I think if you've got 10,000 square feet, 3 access points, and a floor plan, you can probably work through the screens on DNAC to implement that. But if you're looking at 1 million square feet with all external antennas of varying models and angles, something that we truly enjoy modeling, it can save you a ton of work.
Hey, Jim, have you tried this yet with Meraki APs on your DNA center and seen if the Meraki APs will auto-place? Do you have a question from Chris on that? I would imagine that it should, because it shows up in inventories under APs. But Chris, in direct answer to your question, I've not tried it, but I think that's something that we should try before it needs to get out.
I would expect it to work, Sam, based on your logic there. It's an AP that's discovered in the system. You know, technically the file and DNA Center does not know the difference between a Meraki and a Cisco AP. It's an AP.
It's an AP, yeah.
Yeah.
Garth is asking for NDA information like timeline on Ekahau analytics integration of the DNA Center. I suspect that we're probably not going to comment on, make no commitments about NDA stuff, right?
No, I cannot do that. There's tremendously, see, here's the problem, right? To me, all of this is simple, but then I don't actually have to write any of this code. And, well, it probably looks different to the guy who does that.
Yeah, no, we don't want to be releasing that that type of information. It's funny that DNA actually shares the same acronym as NDA.
Yeah, same letters.
Same letters. Oh, sorry, that was a bad joke.
Yeah, what I can tell you, what I can commit to, this is not the first release of this. Well, this is the first release of that, but there's some excitement generating, and you know, just look, the number of people that joined in this webinar, Stu, is very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's what is to keep in mind is that as we're building our projects and enhancing our flows, right? We're trying to bridge that possible, and it's kind of, you want to be able to kind of take what you have from you know, your planned projects, bring it into that that automated workflow that you have already created within DNA Center, right? Because you know, back in the days of the old WCS and prime infrastructure days, you know, we wanted something that was a good workflow to bring us into this. And so now finally that we're here and we've got the right tools on the design side, and then we take those design side tools, bring them into our workflow, because you know, we often get you know, design buildings, we design how the AP should be laid out. And then it's like, oh goodness, now we have to spend hours on prime infrastructure, or sorry, DNA now. And then say, okay, well, where's the APs? Where are the APs? Oh, let's look them out. I got to look at one project file, look at the other. Well, now I don't have to do that. I can just seamlessly take what I've already measured, where those APs should be, and then in that specific room, and then they are now in the map, right? So then now DNA sees it the way the designer had intended to see it, right? And then that way, and along with the walls and whatnot, and as we get closer into the you know, the CMX integration later, is where we're able to say, okay, well, now we know that there's walls there, we can look at attenuation values, and you know, the sky's the limit, right? Is that now we've opened that door, and now we can actually, you know, to use Cisco's you know, new words, is, you know, bridge that possible, right? Bridge to possible what you can do with the partnership and integration that we have with Cisco and Ekahau. And just to reiterate, as you know, Ekahau's been a Cisco partner for many years. I think that's correct. Am I correct in saying that, Miko? I think that's, you can keep me honest there, but it is something that we've been working for a long time to get integration like this.
Well, and you're absolutely right, Stu. I'll tell you what, as a guy, go ahead, Miko. Were you going to comment?
No, you're good. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I was going to say, as a guy who has spent multiple hours looking for a lost AP that just didn't get placed right on a map, and also, like I said, we show up at a convention center, you know, with sometimes 1,000 APs, and it's empty, and 4 days later, we stand a network up and hold a show for the week. You guys might have been to it once or twice. It used to be called networkers, and you know. But this is our opportunity to show that, you know, we do eat our own dog food, and we do 5 of those a year. This is tremendously helpful, one, in taking, as a designer, my intent and communicating it to the network without errors, right? Because if there's an error that gets into that machine, it's because I put it into the project file or I didn't handle something right in post-processing. It wasn't just an error because I'd been sitting placing APs on a map for 5 straight hours and probably needed to take a walk. So I'm looking forward to some of the potential in the future, and it makes doing things that are complicated easy.
Correct. So we've got one question here, which is good, is that we had one guest here saying that, you know, then I guess that Ekahau does not provide real signal strength measurements, but only walls and signal attenuation caused by walls. Is this correct? And I'm assuming that he's talking about when it's being imported. We're importing the AP locations today, but tomorrow we are going to be taking that the next step in that data later on. But today it's just the floor plans, the measurements of the floors, the obstacles, and where the AP locations are. The signal strength is something that's on the horizon.
The model data, yes, okay, the model data, and that's actually an important point to put out, because Ekahau has their rendering engine for the heat maps, and certainly wouldn't want to take anything away from that. DNA Center has a different rendering engine, so what you're going to see is probably similar, but different results because of the different calculations on the heat map. And there's a number of reasons for that. You've got a lot of controls over how to visualize the heat map in Ekahau. It's very rich that way and useful. And the same thing goes for DNA Center. So they are going to be 2 different renderings based on the engines that are driving them. The transfer of the information, the entire model data, is what we're looking to do, and capture that as intended without introducing the opportunity for error or change. The document then becomes the single source of truth. That's the statement that's fondly being bandied about. And in a perfect world, it remains that single source of truth for the life cycle of that implementation.
Excellent. And I'm just clearing up some of the questions that were added within that one stream here. There was another one. Can you, if you imported the project file from Ekahau into DNAC, can you extract the maps back out to use it for Ekahau with attenuations for a new survey again? Well, not at this time. We don't export from DNAC to Ekahau, but that is I can't confirm that if that's on the horizon, but usually if you've already have the maps in place and you're doing a new survey, like a post-analysis survey, it's probably best to start with the workflows of fresh map. Always start with a fresh map and then go out with your Sidekick and iPad or iPhone and do the survey. But I can kind of see something, you know, if you don't have the maps and you need to get the maps out of DNAC, I could see that. But you wouldn't need any of the other information. When you're doing an actual post-analysis survey, you just need a clean map is what you need, because that's the Sidekick combination of the Sidekick and surveying is going to tell you exactly how your wireless is performing. So
I can neither confirm nor deny, but the export function is definitely something I would actually support that because the map is going to make changes over time, right? Your specific example for a post-analysis survey, I agree. I would want to start with a fresh map, but I would like a world where, you know, if it's been a couple of years since I visited, I can get that source of truth back out of DNAC. So that, to me, that makes sense for that use case. But I can't say for certain whether anybody's going to go work on that.
Mm-hmm. One other one was good here from Chris. It was when you import the project file, does it also bring in the AP model antenna? AP model and antenna model, and elevation and azimuth info in as well. I can't.
One of my big pet peeves. Yes, absolutely. Model, elevation, azimuth, all of the angles is pulled in.
Perfect.
So not only that, well, let me give you a caveat on that. There are certain antenna models that are listed as supported on Cisco APs. So if you go down through the list and you pick a non-supported antenna model, that is going to throw an exception error, because the DNA Center has a list of those acceptable models for antennas matching and pairing with the APs. So there's a limited range by product within DNAC, and that may throw you an error. But yes, you can take all of that data, the models, the antenna angles, and the only reason I throw that out there is sometimes I find people, you know, splitting two 2x2 antennas across a 4x4 AP, you know, oftentimes for very good reasons, generally corner reasons. But that's there, yes.
And we'll be talking about third-party type antennas like Ventiv, Ventiv.
No support. No support directly for third-party antennas today, for the same reasons that's been a long-standing Cisco policy. A lot of it is context-driven within DNA Center. You've got DNA Spaces and, of course, all of the CMX product line. Supporting a third-party antenna becomes very difficult in a location scenario or context scenario because of differing lobes or variations in manufacturing and data.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
Yep. Fair enough. Yep. Okay. There's quite a few of the questions here that go through that that we can answer after the recording, or we can stay on. I have outdoor maps with multiple levels of AP elevation. Will DNAC support these imports? Outdoor maps, actually, outdoor maps in DNAC, would that not be, Jim, would that, or Sam, would that not be just considered as an outdoor area, or we could call it an area?
Yeah, I think there's still some, I think there's still some challenges, because I think even the hierarchy in Ekahau Pro doesn't quite work for the campus view. You can certainly have just an outdoor map that, you know, if you're doing a metro deployment where you've got APs on the pole tops or whatever. But if you're talking about a campus view, like a college campus where you have outdoor APs and then a building with indoor APs with multiple floors, it's my understanding that that's still problematic today, I think, in both products.
Agreed.
Right. But not to say that you could just have a plan of an open space. You could just have
a floor. Yeah, you could have a floor that's
one floor just as open
has,
space. Yeah. You call it outdoor. Yeah.
Yeah. Precisely. That's some of that pre-thinking when you launch a project file you want to do and go back and verify with DNA Center. If your end goal is to import that and save yourself, you know, first save yourself some money, and then, you know, decide whether or not you're going to pass that along.
We have there's been a couple of stray questions showing up in the chat window. Would encourage to throw it into the Q&A, but I don't know if there was anything that that we saw there, folks in the chat window, that would have been that we could I think we probably answered live. I think so. Things. Client perspective iPhones. Okay, so this is someone's asking if we're okay. Client perspective iPhones are usually 10 to 15 way lower than RSSI. How does DNA update the heat map inside DNA once Ekahau file has been imported? So I think the question here is that this person, so our guest Glenn writes is that, you know, we've taken that predictive design, and I think we talked about this earlier. We imported into DNA. DNA is going to read the capabilities of the APs that we selected, whether it's the 9130, the 3802, the 9120, and it's going to output it how it sees it on the visualization. But it doesn't, DNA today, I don't think that actually shows a visualization for what clients would see, how we see it. And in Ekahau, we can actually visualize the measured client,
No,
but I think DNA, not today yet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to be on the heat map, but that's certainly what Assurance does do. All right, and Cisco's got a very deep investment. That's the entire point to DNA Center, is that it is an engine that assimilates data, lots and lots of data. Every one of our APs now sends telemetry streams, right? We're talking with several partners within the ecosystem, and we're gathering telemetry streams from the partners. We've also got sensors on the floor which do synthetic testing and actually measure the conditions based against what the prediction of those conditions are. So it's not like it used to be where I've only got one look at it. The planning portion of that, to be able to visualize that, is extremely important within Ekahau. But that data, that model data, is what's going to be presented within DNA Center, and then it's going to be applied to DNA Center's analytics and models. So it's a different function.
Mm-hmm. One question we had at the beginning here, and I think this is more on an Ekahau side, is on a busy Ekahau map with long AP names don't work well. So we dropped the prefix, which is good. A lot of people do. Can we allow for an import then without manually adding the prefix, say 400 APs? Well, if so, this is from our guest Peter. So Peter, what I would generally kind of a recommended way to do is to don't keep your planned APs relatively too long. Have them to try to adjust your nomenclature to reflect the floor that you're on and the building name. But if you're doing to get away from the manual adding of a prefix in 10.1, we can actually go out and tag all of the APs and change the names. So if we're on a floor, we can change the name as a, now it's escaping me, as we can tag a bunch of APs and then change them automatically. And we can also add an additional digit at the end. So let's just say if I wanted to rename the APs, I can do them all at once, and then we can add a digit incrementally at the end. So if you're looking to do some renaming, you can actually do that now in 10.1. So that'll help.
Well, that certainly makes it a lot easier to put the right AP names on that plan before you import it.
Absolutely, it does. Yes, and if you can do that quick and efficiently beforehand, that's yes. And thank you to Miko's team for doing that. That's definitely a time saver for sure.
Those guys are pretty good over there, Stu.
Yeah, they are. You got to give them some more credit, right, Miko?
Hey, thanks all the feedback that we've been getting from you guys.
You're not feeling the love today, Miko? Well, life looks different when you work in the emergency room, doesn't it, Stu?
That is correct. Yes. Yes, it does. All right. Well, I think that we've got a good portion of some of these questions answered. I think now we're getting into some of the questions are really getting into the technical details that take a little more in depth here. But okay. Oh, how can we tag actual serial numbers, MAC addresses of an AP inside DNAC once you import the Ekahau file with the right AP name and model? And I think we've already discussed that. Yes, it will match it up the best as it can. Is if you give it the right AP name, it's going to take it and take that logic and then import it in there for you.
Yeah, let me talk to that real quick, because you want to avoid getting too detailed, right? And at one point in time during the import, we had very strict checking of every single detail. if you think fat fingering an AP name is easy to do, fat fingering a serial number is 3 times easier. And if you want to go to the MAC address level, you can really start to mess yourself up. So things that are exceptions, like the wrong AP model, the intent in the flow right now, the workflow, is to go ahead and process that, but flag it, right? Let you know that there was something that was not optimal. And then the matching logic, like I said, based on the AP name, and then you can also do it based on type. But going to a layer below that really started to introduce some complexity and opportunities, in our opinion, at that point in time. We'll see how this works out. So it's a good comment back, but it's like network security. It needs to be there. It needs to be effective. You don't want to make it overly complex for people to go around it. They just won't use it, right?
Okay, can we get, I'm going to take one more question here. I'm going to take one more question here is, can we result, 1 second here.
Kind of like that last question.
That's right. That's what I'm looking at. Can we use the last, can we use the results of a passive survey?
Right.
Levels,
so that gets into what I was talking about as far as a consumer of that rich data that is being submitted through the Ekahau Project file. And again, echoing earlier comments, I really can't talk to roadmap items like that in a public forum, but that would be a really cool idea, wouldn't it?
It would be, yes.
Yeah. So I can't say that would be something we would definitely look at.
Seems like a natural progression for the software and for the data, doesn't it?
It does. If I were to submit a patent on that, somebody might call that rather obvious. Yeah, but consuming that data, definitely something that we want to target.
Absolutely. So I just had one, we had one, I wanted to leave up this this slide here, was if we has, as we come up to the top of the hour here, or just over, and wanted to thank everyone for that stayed on. I wanted to leave up the question slide here. If you had any further questions on today's webinar, you can reach out to any one of us. And I want to thank Jim and Sam and Miko and Abhishek for joining us today, and to all of you attendees who've taken out your lunch and coffee break and afternoon tea with us, and really value your attendance today. And just to remind everybody is that if you didn't get to us at the top of the hour, we want to make sure that if you are looking at renewals and or looking at purchasing the software, please reach out to your sales and get those orders in, as we have a bit of a price bump that's happening as of January 1st. So wanted to let everyone be aware of that. So wanted to kind of end it off there, and I wanted to thank everyone for joining, and I'm going to go ahead and thank you, and I'll stop the recording. I think I can do that now. All right, there we go.
Well,